Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll go ahead and start our meeting for our budget meeting today. Is there any amendments or additions to the agenda? Can I seek approval on the agenda? Tyler? And all in favor? Thank you. That's carried. And we will go ahead and take time to review the feedback from our public feedback for the budget. And I'll turn the time over to Christine. Oh, Avis, sorry. Do I? Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just draw your attention to the screen. So there was a total of 8 responses within the last week for the presentation for the 2023-2024 preliminary budget. 5 were staff members, 2 were parents, and 1 was a community member. Of these 8 submissions, 4 ranked the preliminary budget presentation as average, 2 said excellent, and 2 said poor. Of these 8 submissions, when asked, given the provincial funding framework, how would you rate the year's overall budget? 6 said average, 2 said poor. Lastly, of those 8 submissions, when asked how you would rate this year's budget allocation of the program funding, 6 said poor and 2 said average. Of the 8 responses, only 5 qualitative. Can I move that? Only 5 left qualitative comments. The majority of the comments were about support staff salaries. Negotiations are underway with both union groups where salaries will be discussed. To address the early learning comment, the EAP program is not specifically funded by Alberta Education, and the funding for the program is allocated from the K-12 base grant. PUF funding is also based on the weighted moving average formula, which results in not every child being funded. Enrollment has decreased as well by over 50% since September 2019. The program is still being offered throughout the division, just the number of programs are being reduced to address these realities. I want to thank everyone who took the time to complete the survey and provide their feedback. And are there any questions?
Thank you, Avis. We will move forward with allowing each of the trustees a 5-minute time allotment to speak generally about the budget or to identify particular issues if they wish to do so. I'd like to allow Christina as our chairperson of the committee, board budget committee, to go ahead and share any comments if you have any, and then we'll move forward with each trustee's type.
Thank you. I'm going to start my little timer. So as part of my remarks today, I wanted to go over a couple things. I wanted to talk as the board budget committee chair about what a budget is. A budget is an opportunity for us to demonstrate our commitment to things that we hold important. It's an opportunity for us to put the action behind our values. We spent a lot of time this year talking about what's important to us as a community, especially as we navigate this change of emerging from what has been a very challenging season at every level of government, every level of community, and certainly in every home. A budget is also an opportunity for us to try to explain in what can feel a little bit complicated, a number system, a very complex system of a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different people. It's a chance for us to wrestle as a community with the conflicting priorities and the different things that each person holds dear and holds important to them. Our budget, I feel, shows a great deal of investment in our values. It shows that we value things that we've heard from our community, things like digital well-being. We've heard it loud and clear from every single level of a community partner, students, parents, teachers, board, that digital well-being is critically important in this time, and we're seeing an investment in that. Well, I'll get to the early years piece in a moment. I also feel that this budget invests in early years with more than $500,000 being invested from the K-12 base grant being moved to early years on top of the funding, the very minimal funding that we get from the province. I feel like this budget shows a commitment to things like our English language learners, to our Indigenous students, holding a space in our classrooms for vulnerable children, and the caretakers who care for them every single day through education, through driving the buses, through cleaning our schools. I feel that this budget shows an investment in the things that we hold as a priority in our community. Personally, I do still have challenges with this budget. I wrestle with the early years piece for pieces I'll get to in a moment. I wrestle with the challenge that we're placed in continuing to pay for busing in a way that has changed over multiple years. I am struggling with our board commitment to financial management in terms of board expenses. These are challenges that I am struggling with. This is not an easy conversation for anyone at this table. But what I want to end with is that I don't think that this debate is about things that are changeable at this table. I want to make sure that on this day, particularly May 29th, that we are focused where the funding actually is. This is not a conversation about where do the pieces of the pie go, when what we're really arguing about is that this pie is too small. We are arguing about pennies when we need dollars. The implementation of a weighted moving average a number of years ago forces our schools to support over hundreds of students with no funding at all. The model to receive funding for things like exceptional learning needs, we get cut off at the knees. We are only able to support them if we happen to identify it by September. This is unrealistic for the fact that children are human beings that move around. I want to very carefully address the early years piece. I know that this will be a conversation today. I am a professional in education. I'm also a professional in early years education. I want to be clear that our challenges here at this table around funding for early years education, EAP, PUF, all of this conversation is not just happening here. The fact that the Alberta government has selected to govern over children in 2 different ministries has caused us to have an unwinnable fight at this table and at childcare tables. We are fighting with each other when we should be looking somewhere else. It is not a conversation about are we putting enough money into early years here? It's a conversation about is our provincial government, who is responsible for holding this portfolio, investing into the early years in a sufficient way to protect children in the long run? I do not believe that they are. And I want to ensure that we collectively are very clear about that fact, that this isn't something that we can renegotiate at this table, but that we have to collectively advocate for children of every single age in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I appreciate that. We'll go around the room and allow each trustee their time. We also would like to acknowledge the absence of our board chair, Allison. She's unable to be here, but has provided a video for us to hear her comments in with her 5-minute time allotment as well. And so we'll go around the room and then we'll take a minute to listen to that. Take 5 minutes to listen to that, actually. So for whoever is next, whoever is ready, will proceed. Craig?
I have no comment on the budget.
And Christine? Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina, for your words. And first, I just want to thank Avis DeKelver and Christine Lee for your leadership in this budget process. Thank you, Avis, for the great video that was up online. It was clear, it was explicit. You guided us and you guided our public and our stakeholders very well in understanding the process, what it's grounded in, and the why behind the decisions that we made. So thank you for doing that. That was a significant piece of this process. So thank you for your leadership and participation in that. I would also like to thank the admin committees, the instructional services committees, and all stakeholders who participated in giving feedback and having a voice in this process and helping the board to understand what are the priorities of our members and of our community. What are the priorities that we have to serve students in the best way that we can? Because serving students is the first board budget priority. The board believes the budget should be developed in the best interests of all students. So as we work together for priorities as a board, our priorities are growing learners and achievement, leading learning and building capacity, and supporting learning and well-being. And with our weighted moving average, we are projected to serve over 12,000 students next year on a budget funded for just over 11,300. So that is a significant shortfall in funding. And I believe it puts us in a position to have to find creative solutions of how to serve these students the best. And I do want to applaud Christine Lee and her team. I believe that you have done that. I believe that this budget reflects our priorities on a universal level. Are there areas that I wish we had more funding for and could serve our students in a better and deeper way? Absolutely. I echo the comments on transportation and not having equitable and appropriate funding for that. I echo the concern of not having equitable and appropriate funding for early learning. We believe that that is foundational for our students' success, and I do not believe we're funded appropriately for that. And I think that when we are faced with this poor of funding, and yeah, I think that difficult decisions have to be made. And one of them was the right sizing of our early learning programming. But I thank you for continuing to put almost $500,000 into that programming, even though it's not between the K to 12, to show and reflect the board priority of early learning as foundational learning. Oops, sorry. I believe that there are elements throughout the budget, and I'll be commenting to those throughout our discussion today that support the priorities of the board. And so I thank you, and I look forward to this debate.
Thank you, Christine. Andrea, are you ready? Thank you.
Thank you to Avis and Christine Lee and their team for your hard work on our $141.83 million budget. Thank you for your past presentations and for making the budget understandable with your graphics. Thank you to Admin Council and to our elementary, middle school, and high school admin representatives, Tara Leggett, Craig DeYoung, and Bill Forrester for speaking to maintaining staffing and to much needed counseling needs. I'm thankful for the additional support, particularly at the elementary level through county school liaisons. One of our board values is that our board believes education at the primary level is foundational to student success and as such is a priority. Given that, I was so sad to lose some of our EAT programs. Hopefully attendance could come back in this area in the future. With this loss, I would really like to see us protect our kindergarten programs and put added support needed into them to make the difference in early childhood education that pays off in future years. I'm concerned about the 7% drop in attendance for this coming year. My dream would be to see a return to the kindergarten classroom EAs to help start children off on the right foot. Further to EAs, could the money we are holding back until we make our numbers in September please be used for EAs at all levels in the fall? I believe it is important to note and for the public to know that the weighted moving average sees our growing division not getting funded for approximately 170 children. It is also important to note that while we received classroom complexity funding, the COVID mitigation funding and bridge funding have been eliminated, so that net gain is not as substantial. In closing, I'd like to thank the public for their important input on this budget and thank all of the division staff for all they do for us. And I agree with my trustees who have spoken already wholeheartedly that we need more dollars to invest in education, and especially in the early childhood years. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. Tyler?
I don't have a lot. I just want to say thank you to everyone involved in the budget committee and instructional budget committee for putting this together. It's always a tough task when you have a limited amount of funds in order to be able to put this in. And in our budget, it's basically people. We're talking about people. So it's just a matter of who we're allocating to, which people are getting which piece of a pie. And when someone gets some, someone else doesn't get any. So it's a tough task. I think the public knows that. I think when it comes to, we've heard a lot about living wages and different things that come across to our employee groups. And I do think it's important to understand that as a board and as a division, we don't get to choose exactly what people get paid for any of our union groups. That is, we don't get to choose what a teacher gets paid in this division. We can't say that, our teachers are worth more than a teacher in Medicine Hat and get to choose and what we pay them. And it's the same idea with all of our union groups. So we're very much handcuffed in that. I think it's important for the public to know that it's not just a matter of us being able to say, hey, we can pay people what we want to pay them out of the budget. Apart from that, I guess I'd say too that we certainly sympathize with a lot of the comments that we hear. And I think as an entire board, we do. It's not just me, I think everyone does. So just again, want to say thank you to everyone for a tough task. And I think it's a good budget. I think we've done a good job of allocating things kind of as best we can. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. And Garrett, are we ready to go forward with Allison's video? I can speak first. Oh, okay.
That even putting words in writing of their concerns or celebrations of the budget is difficult. Even though I'm not in attendance today, I've been a part of the board budget discussions and debates to get here today. I've been able to carry forward the words I have heard clearly into each board discussion on budget and will continue to do so. I want to thank Avis and those that have supported her and the staff that have had their input into the budget. I know it's not easy to juggle, an easy job to juggle around numbers, especially when it's simply not enough money to do for our students. I want to ensure that the division has a budget that acknowledges the needs in our classrooms, the complexities that are in each class and each unique school. Whether that is the need for infrastructure such as more physical space, whether that is the support provided for each classroom with EAs, whether that's ensuring access to books and technology and the important people that do that work through our Learning Commons facilitators and our tech teams, whether that's ensuring clean schools with our caretaking staff or maintaining our facilities with our maintenance staff. We need to ensure we support our teaching staff to be able to teach our next generation and that we have student success for all students. I want to ensure we have a budget that allows us to focus on teaching and supporting students with their academics and prepare them for the future. In the budget process, I want to ensure that school fees are low and that there is transparency within school fees, including parents being informed of increases as we follow division policy. I've been a long, strong advocate for ensuring we are paying people for the work they do and that we are a desirable employer. I've heard from many about the work they are doing in the division, and so many go that extra mile for our students each and every day. I know you are dedicated to our division, and we need to reciprocate with ensuring you feel supported for the jobs you do. In this budget, you will see some areas of change to support the important work each of you do, and we continue to make changes that support our staff through wellness, increases, and budgeting for the need of future increases. In terms of our advocacy, our board is committed to continue to advocate for what we need. We need adequate funding that we are able to support all students for what they need to get an education every single day. We need to keep advocating for our division to be able to pay each and every one of our staff a living wage. After the election, no matter which party gets in, we will continue with our board election advocacy statements of removing barriers that exist to be able to properly compensate our educational assistants and other union workers. I will close in saying that I have appreciated all the engagement from students, staff, parents, and community on what is important to them in budget. I hear you and will do what we can for our ultimate goal of supporting each of you so that you can have student success for all students. Thank you.
We appreciate the opportunity to hear from Allison. I'll share my own thoughts as well. And I'll echo some of the things that have been said around the table. I appreciate that we are speaking to the same topics in a lot of what we're saying. It shows that we have communicated a lot and that we have spent a fair amount of time on these difficult topics, reflecting and exploring and attempting to be creative to meet the needs that are so dynamic and so complex in the absolute best way that we can, and that we have each voiced areas that we recognize a need for focus, and that there's been a responsiveness to that. And so I applaud the process, and for the I express my appreciation to the work and to those who've gone into getting us to where we are and guiding us along the way and adjusting as we have asked to pause along the way, to say let's stop and let's look and let's think this through. And I appreciate the work that has gone into this. um, one of the things I would like to speak to is the reflection of our budget in reflecting our board priorities and how we have outlined our values and outlined our vision and mission, and spoken it through those things about the importance that this board places on learning and on classrooms. And I appreciate that in that conversation we have spoken often to wellness, and that was a topic that was spoken of heavily in our previous year as we made the budget for this last year, and that we've seen those changes and we have seen those efforts, and so I applaud the effort that is being made and appreciate that we are able to move forward in trying to meet some of those needs, and that we're able to create a budget that is reflective of the things that this board and this division have outlined as what is important. I'll speak also to the weighted moving average, as it is something that is a barrier for us in our division because we are a growing division. Last year we had 229 unfunded students. When we went into the school year this year, we are going in with 170 students that do not have funding. It's a difficult position for us to be in, to be meeting the needs of these students without proper funding to do so. And I appreciate that this board is aware of that and that we are advocating to bring equitable education to our division and to our students. I recognize also that we have an adjustment in our funding from last year to this year. Last year, we were working with a revenue of just under $136 million. This year, we're working with just under 142. And with that, we've been able to use our funds to meet some of these priorities. And there's been less need to draw from carryover monies. And so I recognize these efforts that have been made to stay within budget, to have the padding that we need to be able to meet the needs of these students and to anticipate changes in the future as well. Areas of focus that I would like to continue to look at are our classrooms and the number of teachers we have in our classrooms, the number of students we have in our classrooms, the complicated learning needs of those students in our classrooms and how we are meeting those. And with that in mind, I struggle with the decrease this budget shows in our full-time support staff, but I celebrate the increase of our full-time teaching staff, that we are looking at 4.5% increase this year for staff. And I struggle with the fact that we are looking at the 8.7 decrease in the support staff, especially considering that we have increased our enrollment by 49 students this year. And so that is something that I continue to have at the forefront of my mind as we navigate the budget and as we look at that. And so I encourage us to reflect on our priorities as we move through the budget today and to consider if what we have before us is our best effort and is what we can do that is meeting the needs of our students best. I also would like us to take some time to reflect on how we are receiving input from our stakeholders and from our public. The numbers of of people responding to our survey is a little bit low and doesn't provide enough insight for us to guide us and so I would call upon the board to think about how we can to take some time to reflect on that and to strategize together at another point in time that we might be more effective in our effort to do so. I think my time is up, so I'll close with that and just close with a thank you and also drawing to attention those areas of concern. So thank you. I appreciate everyone taking their time to share their comments and to share their thoughts. We will turn our time at this point over to Avis. And Avis, did you want to review the belief statements or do you want me to do that portion? The belief statements, I think that we are all familiar with them and we've hopefully all taken the time to review them as we've gone through this process. They are there on page 3 for us to continue to review and reflect back on as we move through this if we would like to. But they outline our values of learning, inclusion, respect, well-being, and leadership. And the more detailed points to follow, those are there for us to use as review there on page 3. I'm not recognizing a need to go through them word by word, being that we have hopefully all reviewed them. If there's okay, then we will go ahead and turn our time over to you, Avis. Thank you. Sorry, yeah.
So the fee information has been attached to the agenda, as well as it had been provided in previous other meetings. I guess if there's any additional discussions to be had. Not, then yeah, then if there's no more discussion, then I ask for a motion from the board, please.
I move that the board approve the 2023-2024 school fee schedule as presented.
All in favor? And that's carried.
Perfect. So the next is just for the overall revenues and allocations, including use of one-time reserves, which just a reminder does have to get ministerial approval. But we anticipate that I've got the letter, so hopefully we should be good to go there. So any discussion on that? If not, then
Just for a point of discussion for the sort of public conversation, this is one of those areas that was on my long list of things that I wanted to fit into my 5 minutes. I wanted to draw attention to, as board trustees, we think about the budget all year long because that is our time. But I wanted to remind folks who maybe are not thinking about it all the time, that in the past number of years, we've used a number of reserves, a large number, big number of reserves that Avis was just mentioning. for a number of reasons. One being a lack of sustainable funding out of the base grant, and two being the requirement from the ministry to ensure a reserve cap. And so our executive council has been working very hard with all of our schools to ensure that all of our reserves are down to the required percentage, which is
3.2.
okay, perfect. 3.2, which if we think about what that number means, is it means a great deal of potentially instability in the face of another crisis. This division was protected by the reserves when COVID happened. The livelihoods of the people who educate our children, who support our children, was protected by reserves, which have become dramatically dwindled. Far less one-time reserves spent on things like EAs, so important. Things like mental health support, so important. Our teams have been creative in how to add those where we can, but it does leave us in a precarious position where we can't make that choice in the future. So I just wanted to highlight that as we move through this section.
Thank you, Christina. Any other comments? I did have a question myself as well. Christine, would you be able to clarify what we're referring to when we say transfers? Sorry, at the bottom of 28 there.
It's in expenditures. Yeah, transfers could be transfers to people putting money in reserves for saving for some capital equipment, that sort of thing. Or in this case, many of I think the school's transfers are money that they're not quite sure yet where they're spending on. Avis, you want to? It's we also transfer the biggest chunk of that is a transfer to the technology evergreening budget. So it's a capital transfer. So the money comes in and then we transfer it to capital for our evergreening. And so that's about 450,000 this year. The rest would be like schools putting it in because they're not sure yet what they want to spend it on.
Sorry, Christina. Oh, any other comments or questions at this period? Okay, we'll turn the time back over to Christina. Oh, sorry, Tyler.
Are you able to, is it on the bottom? Sorry, I don't have the printout in front of me. Or is the amount from reserves being shown in there? Just so it comes up and public can see.
Yeah. So for the 2023-2024, the amount of reserves that's being used in this budget is 798,000. In the 22-23 budget, it was 4.2 million.
And Christina.
So I move that the board approve the revenues and the use of one-time reserves for the 2023-2024 budget as per page 27 as presented.
Sorry, and that's carried.
All right, so next up we have expenditures and transfers. So I think we're going to go through each program throughout the expenditures and we'll approve them. And then at the end, we'll do an overall approval. So we will start with the instructional budget. If there's any discussions or questions.
Andrea, did you have a question? Christina thought she did. Sorry, I had someone pointing that she did. Sorry, was there any questions or comments? Christina, if you...
I move that the board approve the instructions, expenditures, and transfers as per page 34 to 36 of the 2023-2024 budget as presented.
And all in favor? And any opposed? And that's carried.
All right, next is the administration expenses on page 37 to 39.
And are there any questions or comments for this section? And Christina, if you wouldn't mind with the motion. Thank you.
I move that the board approve the administration expenditures and transfers as per pages 37 to 39 of the 2023-2024 budget as presented.
And all in favor? And any opposed? And that's carried. Thank you, Avis.
Perfect. Next is the plant operations and maintenance budget, which is on pages 40 to 41.
And are there any questions or comments for this section? And Christina, if you don't mind with the motion.
I move that the board approve the plant operations and maintenance expenditures and transfers as per page 40 to 41 of the 2023-2024 budget as presented.
And all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Avis.
Next is the transportation budget, which is pages 42 to 43.
And are there any questions or comments for the transportation budget? Yes, Christina.
Sorry, I'm just on a rant today. Sorry. Just another one of those moments where I just want to draw attention. Like, this is just a moment to talk about the budget and make it clear sometimes for the public where these system level things get really interwoven. I just want to make it clear about the transportation funding changes. So there was some changes announced publicly as part of the provincial funding that transportation funding would be changing. Our division in terms of ensuring that we are able to operationalize this in a safe manner and with all of the sort of barriers in terms of accessing enough busing and routes and drivers and the actual infrastructure to make what is it, 1 kilometer? 1 kilometer.
Yeah. 1 kilometer for K to 6 and 2 kilometers for 7 to 12.
Which is itself, it's fine. So I just want to draw attention to the fact that that was announced and the intention is to operationalize that not this coming school year, but the following school year in alignment with the requirements of that funding. And that even with that, it's not enough bus money for what we already have. The amount of work that has gone into ensuring that every student in this city that is eligible for busing is receiving safe transportation has been a Herculean effort over the last number of years. And this change, while our board is very in support of increased access to accessible transportation, will be a challenge given that the funding will be insufficient for the new distance. And does it account for the fact that this board also believes in wellness and the well-being of children and encouragement of things like active transportation or, feeling safe in one's neighborhood and being able to walk to your neighborhood school. So I just wanted to take a moment to share that feedback and apparently just keep ranting. Sorry.
This is the platform. Thank you. Can I follow up that conversation and for my own clarification? This is a grant, right? Will we be properly funded once we submit our numbers of who qualifies for that funding? For that transportation, will we be properly funded? I know they used old numbers when they gave us what they threw out there, the idea of what we might get, but when it comes down to the real, actually what we're going to get, we will be properly funded, will we not?
So I'll talk to this in two phases. So for 23-24, we're not required to transport at the new distance. But we're going back to what we call an application basis to get our grant funding. So for the last 3 years when we were under the new when they changed to this new funding framework with the WMA and all that other things, all they did was they froze transportation where it was and then gave it some increases. So they didn't, because we weren't doing an application basis for eligible students, because that's how we used to get funded, we were frozen for our growth, and we made a significant change when we redid our boundaries and moved kids across the river to take pressure off Chinook, and then to move the French immersion to take pressure off of Coalbanks and other schools in West Lethbridge. And so we were busing more kids, of which, because they froze the grant from the eligibility piece, That's why we were significantly underfunded. So for this budget year, 23-24, they're going back to the grant application. So they gave us an estimate in their budget. Now, the estimate they gave us was assuming we were actually going to move to the new model. So when Christina says we won't be funded, that would never have funded us appropriately changing to the new model. But what it does, we've done a mock application. It is just under what we need to operate under what we're currently doing now. So I'm not really worried for 23-24 when we do this grant application. However, I am concerned that when we go into 24-25, unless there is some more money injected into transportation by the government, that we will not be able to meet our costs. Bus providers are increasing their rates across the province because, of course, they're having to buy numerous amounts of buses, putting capital to address the sheer quantity of buses that are going to have to be serviced and staffed and that sort of thing. And so am I concerned for 24-25? Yes, I am.
Thank you for clarifying that. Any other thoughts or comments for the transportation budget? And Christina, if you have a motion for us.
I move that the board approve the transportation expenditures and transfers as per pages 42 to 43 of the 2023-2024 budget as presented.
And those in favor? Great.
And last but not least is our capital and debt expenditures, which is on pages 44 to 45. Just to give a little bit more context here, this is our amortization and our IMR funding, which is your infrastructure maintenance and renewal funding.
Any comments or questions for our capital and debt services? And Christine, if you didn't have the motion for us.
I move that the board approve the capital and debt services expenditures and transfers as per pages 44 to 45 of the 2023-2024 budget as presented.
And those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And Davis?
And so the last one, I'll just go back to the beginning. That doesn't make anybody sick watching it. So the last one that's up for recommendation is the overall approval of the budget.
Thank you, Avis. And Christina is the, oh, I'm sorry, Andrea.
Sorry. Will there be a chance, like, to go back to the base instruction? Is there any chance that we could get more EAs this year? Could we go back and revisit that? Okay, I'm sorry.
The budget was just approved
Yeah, I'm
on that
sorry.
one. So it has been approved.
Sorry.
Any other thoughts or comments before we move forward with the approval of the budget? Tyler?
Quick question then in regard to Andrea. Is there any contingency in the budget for EAs sitting there, or where's that?
So there's $300,000 that has been currently held back just to ensure that we do meet our enrollment numbers in September. And so come September 30th, when we know final enrollment numbers, that 300,000 can be up for discussion as to what it can be used for, and then will be included in the fall operating budget update.
So we could talk about that going towards EAs when we get to that point.
And that's what we did with, we had a similar amount for 22-23 that we did use. It was all put towards staffing.
Okay,
You bet.
thank you.
Any other discussion? Comments or questions? Yes, please.
I just want to, so again, I always love talking about budgets in public because it's an important piece of infrastructure. So just to clarify the piece that we just talked about around when we might be able to approve additional funds. So for the public, so when we have an estimate of how many students we will have in the fall. It's based on many important numbers from very important software, and it's very complicated formulas. That being said, our division is extremely financially sound. In order to ensure that we don't spend money we might have to pay back from spend, we hold back a little bit of money assuming that we probably will meet our enrollment numbers, but just in case, we would never have to, we deeply, deeply value the work of every single employee in this division, and we would never want to compromise someone's livelihood by overestimating how many staff we need and then needing to withdraw, right? And so we hold back a certain amount of funds that the board then can participate in a conversation about, as well as executive council, board budget committees, things like this. That funding is then released in the fall when we hit those numbers. To my understanding, we've never not hit those numbers. Is that correct? Or like we are unlikely to not hit? Yeah, we are very likely to hit those numbers and release those funds. That comes around in September. There's a second board budget process that happens again in the fall. That's a similar conversation. So folks who are interested in the budget conversation, which yay, good, love when people are interested, can re-engage again in the fall to understand what happens with that money. As soon as we know that there's students that we expected to come, they will be funded, right? We can release that funding and ensure that there's sufficient support based on the funding we have available.
So, to clarify, that money that is this held back monies is typically used to fund full-time teachers, correct?
Yeah, it varies. Could be used for teachers, could be used for educational assistants, just depends on the situation that we find ourselves in. Yeah, and generally speaking, as mentioned, we have there's a few different areas where there's potential for that because there's always, the number of teachers that we have right now, highly unlikely to be the number of teachers we have in the fall. Same thing with educational assistants because there's always new kids that arrive in the fall, new needs, that sort of thing. We're generally speaking busy with staffing in the fall. So the question becomes, how do you work that within the budget? And there's a few areas. One is in August we get a sense of what we spent this past year, and are there some monies left over? And generally speaking, there are, and so that's an opportunity to do that. There's that 300,000 for enrollment growth that we anticipate we'll be able to access. There's also, we've done some work, and I don't want to say for sure, but I believe in the complexity grant, there's some money set aside for educational assistance as well. So there's a few potential areas where there are opportunities for that, and we anticipate that we are going to need to add more educational assistance and probably a few teachers as well, depending on how the numbers shake out. We're okay right now on the teacher side, but we'll see what happens in September.
I appreciate that. Any other comments? Questions? I'll take the opportunity to speak before we move to the motion for myself in my own representation and how I will be voting today. I continue to struggle with the piece of our staffing, particularly of our educational assistants. And I say that recognizing the incredible complexity of it and have spent a fair amount of time. I think when we started into our budget process this year, I had 5 pages of questions and spent a lot of time working through those. And as I worked through those questions and did a deep dive into our budgets and compared them year to year and went through and compared them to other divisions even, I recognize how complicated I begin to recognize. I wouldn't be so presumptuous to say that I understand, but I begin to recognize how complicated that is and how difficult these decisions really are. Even with the movement of we have far more high school students this year than we had last year, 400 more than we had last year. And so the needs of EAs and the needs of staffing change as our student body moves through each different level. There's different needs. And so even details like that make a big difference. But this is something that we continually focus on and speak to. And so I just want to highlight that as an area of concern for me, as well as our early learning approach. And I struggle with the difficult decisions that have had to have been made on that. And the process by which those decisions were made, and so struggling to understand and to reconcile that is what I would like to represent for myself today. Any other comments or questions before we go to a motion? Craig?
All our votes are recorded.
That would be correct, yes.
Andrea?
I too really struggle with the downsizing of EAs and the early education component in our division. And I do acknowledge all the work that went into the budget and realize that we just really need more money coming our way to educate our young children in our division, and how hard those decisions have been. And I hope that in the future we will have more money, and it gives me some comfort that we could put our money, our 300,000 toward EAs in the fall if we make our numbers. And I'm praying that we do. I'm sure that we will. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Any other comments or conversation? Okay, we'll hand that over to you, Christina, for the motion.
Okay, I move that the board approve the 2023-2024 preliminary budget for Lethbridge School Division as detailed in the previous motions, and authorize administration to allocate and expend funds in accordance with the budget, and that the board authorize administration to amend the 2023-2024 preliminary budget if required by changes in the requested ministerial approval on use of reserves.
And those in favor? And those opposed?
If it goes to a 3-3, what happens then?
The budget fails. We do not have a budget. We will not have a budget for 23-24 school year.
And I'll just call for, would we like to restate the motion or just call for the vote? We'll just call for the vote. All in favor? And those opposed? And that's carried. And we prepare our budget using our assurance plan, and sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you, Jenny. I just wanted to say my thanks to everyone who helped prepare the budget. And Avis does all the heavy lifting of the work, and all the presentation documents and whatnot. So thank you for all your work. And it is a really, as trustees have commented, this is a team effort. It's not one or two people sitting in a room. We have a committee of administrators who represent each of their levels, middle school, elementary, and high school. We have our instructional leadership at the table. Our administrators are talking back and forth with their peers so that they understand the challenges in developing this budget. Is a complex budget. And I'm going to get on my soapbox and agree when, the WMA is not helpful for our division. And we need to have every student funded by every dollar. And so thank you for your advocacy on that. So thanks.
We will move to our next item on our agenda. In conjunction with our budget, we work closely with our assurance plan, and Superintendent Cheryl has prepared our assurance plan for our next year, and we'll have the opportunity to have her review it for us. Cheryl.
Thank you. Just as your annual budget is due to the province at the end of this month, so too is the annual assurance plan for the board. And so certainly the assurance plan, as you know, is just like the budget, is framed around a breadth of different opportunities for input. First of all, we have to keep in mind that there's requirements from the province of Alberta with respect to outcomes and as respect to the assurance domains that must be covered in our plan, and I'll point those out. As well, the board has an annual town hall and certainly spent a good time going through the details and the outcomes of that town hall at your strategic planning session, and as well, different kinds of input throughout the year. Subsequent to the board establishing priorities as well as the governance domain, then it does go to a full day strategic planning session with all the entire leadership team of the school division. So certainly it has robust a process for framing what's in the plan. So if we take a look, I'll just sort of walk through that. And so, Kristen, if you can sort of scroll along with me, that would be great. We're going to go past the message accountability statement. So the jurisdiction profile, that's part of just having the public understand what is their profile, what kind of city do we live in. And so we'll keep going, and that's a couple pages. And if we could stop at assurance framework, the guiding principles for assurance, those are provincial guiding principles. So the province provides the guiding principles. Those of you who have been around for a little bit longer know that it used to be called accountability framework, and now they call it assurance framework. And so the point that the shift in thinking on the part of the province was that we need to not just be accountable, we need to be able to assure our public as governors, as educators, that we're taking a look at all of the things that the government has decided are the domains that are important for guiding the education of our children. So if we scroll down and we look at the color chart, in the circle, those are the provincial government assurance domains. Student growth and achievement is at the center of their model, teaching and leading, learning supports, governance, local and societal context. And the board, when we closed the strategic planning session in March, decided on what their priorities would be. There are 3 priorities: growing, and you've heard that along as you've discussed the budget, growing learning and achievement lines with student growth and achievement with the province. The priority of the board, the leading learning and capacity building, aligns with the provincial domain of teaching and leading, and the priority of supporting learning and well-being as the division priority aligns with the provincial domain of learning supports, and governance aligns with governance, and local societal context aligns with that. And so just pointing out that it's, as we move forward, it is aligned with the provincial domains, and so certainly is aligned for both the assurance plan that you're looking at today, as well as your assurance reporting will be aligned when you get to that in the fall in November. So the first domain, local and societal context, I won't go through all of that because certainly you're familiar with the programs in the division. I really encourage any of the public, to take some time to read what our context is, because our context, as you've suggested with the budget, really does drive some of the decision making. We have complex classrooms, that's been talked about. We have a significant number of English as additional language learners. We have significant numbers of Indigenous students, and certainly we have growing complexity, as well as challenges with being able to support one of the programs that we've talked about is our early education program, because it's not funded by the province, right, in K-12 education. But certainly, I too am really thrilled that I'm still taking $500,000 and putting it into a program that's not provincially funded. And lots in there on supporting families. If we keep scrolling, Kristen. That was talked about as critically important during the board strategic planning. And so certainly a lot of the things that are happening to support families are there. You can keep scrolling. We're going to go to health and wellness. That was also a priority that was identified at the town hall, as well as during the board strategic planning, inclusive education, and actually when you just take 10 minutes and read through this section, it's quite astonishing the I always feel really proud when I'm done reading this section in terms of the work that's being done in this division to support kids and families and staff. And we have much to be proud of for sure in this school division in terms of what it is that we're providing as programs. Curriculum development and assessment. Of course, this year, not only, will we be moving, does the plan move forward? The idea of thinking classrooms and critical thinking. It also moves forward the rollout of curriculum, right, as anticipated. We've got technology on page 19. We've got our employee demographics are there for you and for the public. And if we go to the bottom of page 20, you'll see that Indigenous education does have, the reason it's not a lengthy piece there is because there is Indigenous education has its own strategic plan. And so that will be linked and further details are provided in that Indigenous plan. If we go to page 21, pages 21, 22, and 23 are the governance domain. And this would look very familiar to all of the board members. These are what you developed at the strategic planning as governors. And so you've got the outcomes there. Now the outcomes, outcome one, engagement of stakeholders is a provincial requirement to have that as an outcome. Outcome two, collaboration with other school authorities, municipalities, and communities is also a required outcome, and certainly the board has identified a number of strategies to implement there. Fiscal resources is a required provincial outcome. Curriculum articulated and designed for implementation in local context is the provincially required outcome. And again, the board has outlined a number of strategies. Outcome 5, cycle of continuous improvement, is provincially required, and there's a number of strategies outlined. Advocate to remove barriers in learning was a outcome that this board identified in your strategic planning that was in addition to the required outcomes by the province. And so I'll stop at each section. So I'll stop here with the governance to see if there's any questions or comments. Good. The next domain required in the plan is the growing learners and achievement. And so certainly those outcomes are what is at the center of everything we do. That's our primary business, and that's taking care of the learners in our schools. And so again, the outcomes are required by the province. And so we've got the outcome there of students achieve prescribed provincial learning outcomes, demonstrating strength in literacy and numeracy, and a number of strategies in place to support that outcome. Disrupted learning, barriers to engage and transition was something that the board came up with as one of the strategies that was new to the division to support that provincially mandated outcome. Outcome 2, students apply knowledge, understanding, and skills in real-life contexts and situations, provincially mandated outcome. And that's where we really focus a lot on the learning competencies piece, experiential learning. And we've throughout the year talked and celebrated about many things with experiential learning, especially the amazing opportunities that our high schools have had with off-campus and dual credit. And of course, we're in the launch of the collegiate program opportunity for students next year, as well as the experiential learning that our elementary students are experiencing with the focus on thinking classrooms and hands-on learning and exploration within our classrooms. Outcome 3, students use ongoing assessment feedback to reflect on their progress, another provincially mandated outcome, and there's again strategies there. Outcome 4 is the advancing reconciliation by acquiring and applying foundational knowledge, as well as the resources necessary to support First Nations and maintain Inuit student achievement, and a number of strategies there. And those sort of almost summarize or try to bring together, weave together the larger plan that is the Indigenous Education Plan under outcome 4. And then we've got leading learning and building capacity. That's the board's second strategic priority. And the leading learning and building capacity, this is about, really focuses on your staff. How are we building the capacity of staff to be the best that they can be, build capacity of staff, of teachers to make sure that they're meeting the teaching quality standard and we have excellence in our classrooms, building the capacity of your school leaders so that they are aligned with the leadership quality standard. And I'm happy to say, I'm sure you can be, and I want to recognize human resources, Rhonda Oss, as well as instructional services for the number of things that they're starting to do with support staff is amazing. So you'll see a lot of professional learning opportunities and initiatives there. For example, this year they worked on a leadership program for our head caretakers. Next year we've got a Parabyte, am I saying that right? Parabyte program for our education assistants. So we're really working hard to make sure when we talk about building staff capacity, we're talking about all staff capacity and making sure that we've put structures in place that help them grow and learn and become better at what they do. So all people in the division then under this outcome are learners. Students are learners and staff are learners, as well as board members. And so that'll take us to supporting learning and well-being, the yellow section. Now this would have what in our previous areas, I'm going to stop at leading learning and building capacity because I didn't stop to ask if there's any questions or comments. The supporting learning and well-being, that's takes our inclusive learning that the board had previously as a priority, but then also features what the board found to be something really important that in the strategic planning piece as they looked through town hall results, as they looked through feedback and reflected on what it was that they wanted to have as a focus for students and staff, and that was the well-being piece. And so this area is about inclusivity, being inclusive. It's also about well-being. Of course, inclusive is connected with well-being because well-being is connected with being included and part of and connected to a community. And so when we take a look through here, we've got the welcoming outcome 1, a provincially required outcome, the welcoming, caring, respectful, inclusive, and safe learning environments that demonstrate and understand and respect uniqueness of all learners is there certainly with a number of strategies that are in place. The outcome 2, meet learner needs and emphasize a sense of belonging and high expectations. And so you'll see again a lot of the supports that really as a division we can be very proud of that we're able to provide to our students. Shared understanding of inclusive education and collaborative partnerships. And again, you'll see reference to the RTI squared framework. That's response to intervention with learning as at the center of the focus. We've talked about UDL, Universal Design for Learning, throughout the year. We've talked about thinking classrooms. All of those are strategies that fold into supporting all our students in classrooms. The cross-ministry initiatives and wraparound services. Those, of course, those have been strategies that have been in place for a number of years. And I know that this board, as boards have for very many years and will continue to, I'm sure, encourage that whole concept of wraparound. I know Christina earlier talked about sort of that misalignment between early learning and taking care of children's services and what's happening there, and education, and where, you know, there's sort of that lack of alignment, which results in cracks like early education, right? Rather than it be wrap around in a comprehensive model that takes care of children at all ages. We've got the wellness for all piece that is there, and we've got the infrastructure, including technology that supports learning and meets the needs of Alberta students and their families and communities. And, you know, with that, I just want to take a minute to say we are incredibly fortunate to have the guidance of Christine and her facilities and maintenance team in terms of being able to have foresight, being able to work with government to get approval for different projects. And, really it's really makes you feel proud when you go to meetings and our division is touted as having like the best capital plan in the province. When our division is touted as having the best foresight in terms of planning and the first to get things in and the first to have all the data that they need. And that is thanks to Christine Lee, Daniel Heaton, as well as Chris Chapman in terms of them working really hard to prepare things that give us the edge in terms of, being the division that's ready to have approvals of things and move forward. And as well as incredibly creative in terms of processes. When I think about what Daniel put together to get feedback for the new West Side School and actually having all stakeholders, parents, staff members, community members, board members come together and actually put together models I'm using to scale pieces. And so just a really proactive and creative department. And we can't really take that for granted, nor should we take for granted if you go to other cities and visit other schools, we take for granted how amazing our facilities look. And when you go to some other places and go in their facilities in terms of the maintenance and cleanliness, we're incredibly fortunate here to have the caretaking teams we do and the maintenance crew that we do in terms of keeping our facilities places that are great for staff and children. Always work to do. Still a few facilities that are what I call sort of overheated, but of course those are on the queue and waiting for, but really we're very fortunate. So I just wanted to stop and say that because we don't often talk about that a lot, and it does have a huge impact on learning. And that takes me to the end of supporting learning and well-being. Are there any questions? Craig?
Now, I may be mistaken, but I thought last year we also included the results of the diplomas, the PATs, and all the surveys, and I don't know where that is.
That's in your annual education results report that comes in November.
Okay.
Yeah, but there used to be one plan. And as I explained sort of when I did the November plan this year, in November, the board, you received your annual education results report.
And that's sent up to Edmonton too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Christina?
Not a question, just while we've gone kind of through the major sections, I just want to appreciate all the work that's gone on here and looking through all the different strategies that'll be happening. I just want to appreciate all the work that has been done and the work that will be coming next year. Looks like a busy year when you read this. And I just want to acknowledge sort of the holistic nature of this assurance plan in terms of you can see that this really commits us to looking at each learner and each member of our learning community as a whole person, whether it's their learning needs, their well-being needs. It mentions certain board committees, administration, and operational committees that work collaboratively to ensure that there's opportunities for students that even 10 years ago wouldn't have been imaginable, right? Like the commitment here, like multiple instances of land-based learning mentioned throughout, right? The opportunities around food provision, which, as we continue to see sort of the erosion of the edges of education continue to be challenging for schools. But I appreciate the work that this shows to sort of step up to that challenge and the commitment to continuing to work through the challenges of recovering in terms of literacy and numeracy after COVID, early education, and those kind of challenges, and the commitment to working with additional agencies to support students and staff at all levels as whole people. So thank you.
And the other area that I was remiss in not recognizing, and I know that when the Indigenous plan gets linked, our Indigenous education team is humming, oh my goodness, in terms of what they've been able to do this year, under the leadership of Joel Tailfeathers and his Indigenous lead teachers and the Indigenous coaches in high schools. So certainly really look forward to, I'll be watching from afar, but look forward to seeing the great work continue, as you mentioned, for example, the land-based learning, Indigenous ways of knowing being embedded in classrooms. And so not just sort of the one-off celebration days, but certainly that embracing of, what does an Indigenous lens look like when you take a look at different areas of curriculum. So I certainly want to commend that team for the amazing work and how far they've come in terms of doing that in school. So what, if there's no questions, what we need, again, this has to be formally approved by the board. And once that approval, then this will be posted on our website and will be submitted to Alberta Education as part of your planning and reporting requirements as a board.
Any thoughts or comments before we go to a motion, Christine?
I just want to say thank you for all the work that's put into this. And you're right, Cheryl, we are a leader in the province on sharing and creating an insurance plan and a capital plan. And that comes from many conversations with many trustees and just how their divisions do this. And I know that I've been spoken to about how we get to this point, and we're able to applaud our executive team for the hard work that they do. So thank you. And I think what's great about this plan is we celebrate an incredible division. We often talk about the cracks that we have and the things that we need to work on, because there are always things, but this is a plan we're able to stop and celebrate good things happening and good learning happening and good support happening. And I applaud our team, our leadership team, for the vision that you carry, because this plan clearly delineates where we want to go and how we're going to get there. And so thank you for putting this together and all the work that you've put in. So with that, I move that the board approve the assurance plan as presented.
And those in favor? And any opposed? And that's carried. And if there are no other comments or questions, we will move to adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and for your thoughtful insight, for sharing your pieces of advocacy as well as your pieces of celebration. And we will look for a motion to adjourn. And Christine? And all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.